So tonight we're joined by Ave. So if I can, Gabriel and Paula, well, that's actually Zach, but they're here with us and they started a company based in the plateau here in Montreal called Ave. So what they do is basically uh, growing and selling of microgreens. So they use vertical farming, urban farming. Um, so yeah, that's just like more about them, but obviously we can ask them some more too because I'm curious a bit more about some of the details too. But um, yeah, in general, I don't know. I want to ask them. I guess to start, maybe can you guys just like do a little introducing of yourselves and kind of what Ave is and how it's all started?
Yeah, so Ave right now is a tiny urban farm in La Centrale Agricole, which is a cooperative farming space in Marché Central. And we have some vertical production of salad greens and herbs, as well as microgreens. Um, and we just started, and
Well, we started in September of this year, of last year.
yeah, so 4 or 5 months now.
hmm And it's really in the first stage of development.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very small company. We're basically spent 3 months building the infrastructure to hold like the towers and all the materials needed to grow the plants. And in the last 2 months, we've been focusing on selling the product, which has been a challenge. Um,
Yeah.
and we are currently now facing our first crisis.
Well, we can get to that later, but just a little bit more background. So, I studied environmental science and agriculture at McGill, and kind of in the context of everything we were learning, kind of thinking about where I wanted to direct my career and efforts, given the context of like the climate crisis. I thought agriculture is just so important in any one of the scenarios humanity decides to go down. We have to produce, you know, the statistic is like 70% more food by 2050. Um, or it's, it's, there's a degree of error to that statistic, but it's a lot. It's like a doubling of our production capacity on less land, given the constraints of uh, there's less and less water, less and less access to land, um, and climate change is affecting agriculture worldwide. So it's like a massive challenge to feed the growing population, address food security around the world. So that's like my background. So I tried to get involved in urban agriculture after I graduated, and I couldn't get a job. I had a few interviews, couldn't get a job. So I had built this like
You get a job that paid a living wage, right?
well, even then, like I got an offer for $13 an hour, and I was like, okay, sure, I'm gonna do it. Um, and then COVID hit, and they were like, you know what, nah, like it's not gonna work. Um, and I realized I didn't have any experience, and it's hard for young people to get experience in agriculture. Like the common thing to do is to volunteer on farms like woofing or kind of community oriented volunteering work, because a lot of the agricultural production is consolidated in fewer and fewer larger farms, um, and the average age of farmers is just increasing. Like farmers are getting older, and it's part of the challenge to get young people involved in agriculture and getting young people that experience that's necessary to actually be valuable in agriculture. So that's what this project kind of became about, was kind of getting that experience, um, for myself and for anyone who's interested, like my peers, people I went to school with. Um, And yeah, that's kind of the base of it. And I guess I'll open it up to Gabe to say something about his involvement in the project so far.
Yeah. So Zach and Paula originally approached me in the summer. Like they originally asked me to help them write a grant because I have some experience in doing that kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, sure. Like I'd love to like just like help out, um, give you guys a hand on the project. And then they were like, Gabe, you should become a partner in this project. Like you should like really work on this with us. And I was like, nah, it's like not really my thing. Like I was doing food security stuff in university at Concordia. I was involved with setting up some food production gardens on Concordia's downtown campus when I was there, and like it was cool. And I was involved in the Concordia Food Coalition, but like it's not really where I've been. Like food stuff is not really where I've been since university. So I was like, nah. But then a couple months went by, and I was like, you know what? Like this is pretty cool. And what attracted me, one thing that attracted me to the project is just the idea of like, how do you make a project like this viable? Seems like such a challenge. Like, sure, you're growing food and it's really nice and it tastes good, but like, there's a lot of really nice food that tastes good out there. So this kind of, yeah, this aspect of like, I mean, like in like in like raw business terms, like getting the product to market and like marketing the product was kind of something that interests me because I'm interested in like how people organize around an objective or around a project to like really to make it happen. And most of my experience with that is in a nonprofit context. But I'm super curious about the for-profit context because I want to know how that world works. So that's why I've been helping with the project. Mostly, I've been like going around to like small like grocery stores and markets and stuff to like try and get our product onto their shelves. And that's what I've spent most of November doing. And other than that, I've been working also on grants and stuff, and kind of thinking about a strategy, like what is our product, like how do we make it appealing, like how do you brand it, right? Like what's the best price point, and all these things that are like really much more businessy than about like food security or anything like that. So that's kind of where I've the angle I've come at it from.
Yeah, I guess I had a question picking up on one thing you said about yeah, some of the challenges involved with this or trying to get it out there. And we've seen it more picking up recently, especially in the last year, I think, of just food grocery delivery and local producers or deliverers. Like obviously Lufa Farms is something that like comes to mind for me, but it does still seems like there's not a huge number of people undertaking, right, like local farming to the extent that you are. And um, what are some of the challenges involved with that? Like why do you think there aren't more of these, or yeah, what are some of the challenges or barriers?
Well, it's again, I think for us personally, and I think for a lot of new farms, it's just having the right experience to be able to farm and get your product to market, like Gabe was saying, and do it in a way that is sustainable financially. because it's really hard. And I think in an urban context, it's kind of like using kind of non-conventional methods. There's a lot of work that you have to do, a lot of figuring out to make it work. Loofah, obviously, like you said, is very successful with their rooftop greenhouses, and people are taking notice of that. And there's more and more, like it's really picking up. There's a lot more urban agriculture going on around the world. New companies starting, because increasingly the technology is getting there to the point where it's and the business models and companies have been able to do it successfully. Loofah, again, a prime example. So it's attracting like investors to the controlled environment agriculture kind of what's the term? Sorry, it's
market potential.
Sorry.
Market potential, future market potential.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a new thing. I mean, traditionally, urban agriculture has been more of a community-oriented endeavor, to supplement, like, you know, the food security of local communities, like food deserts, and that continues to go on, but that hasn't scaled in a way that kind of displaces some of conventional agriculture's impact on food production. Or yeah, it's kind of how do I explain this? It's more market oriented rather than community oriented. What's the new companies that are coming out now, and the new interest. So yeah, there's still a lot of barriers, but it's coming.
Okay, we have a question from Andy.
Sorry, I raised my hand. I kind of had a question about your market, like how, because obviously, like just looking at the website here too, you know, it's about like $6 for herbs and microgreens, and so obviously you guys have just started this business and you need to make money. But I'm just wondering, like in terms of your vision, you know, what is your market? Do you want this to go into grocery stores? Are you looking more for like restaurants, or kind of what is your vision kind of for this, and how you guys have thought about like expanding and building it?
I think that's a really good question, because like that's a question we've asked ourselves like a million times, and we've gone back and forth. Like, you know, we started like, oh, we grow food, we have to sell it to restaurants, and then no restaurant is buying food because it's COVID, and like,
well, they're cutting their cost in food related. So when you try to sell them microgreens for, I don't know, $60 a kilo, is not really appealing. Basil sounds expensive, it's $44 a kilo, but it's actually a good deal. But it's hard to convince them that you're getting a good deal on this basil and in the quality that you get. But right now, they don't care much about quality of presentation of the plates. So it was hard to market towards restaurants.
Restaurants are really struggling right now. They're just trying to stay afloat. Like, we sell to pizzaioli. We convinced them of the quality of our basil, even though it's more expensive than the conventional
importer basil,
the imported distributor guys. But they told us they had 7 locations and now they're down to 1. And at this one location, they used to use 8 kilos of basil a week, and now they're down to 2 kilos of basil a week. So restaurants are just trying to stay afloat. So then we went to grocery stores. But grocery stores are not, like the niche grocery stores we marketed in weren't doing so well either.
One approach of Ave is like zero waste. Like, we don't want to pack our food in plastic. Even though it is a proven model, we would be selling them easier. We would be making profit easier with plastic. We just don't want to go towards that because then we just become another producer that just produces waste of plastic. So we were focusing on like zero déchet, or like zero waste grocery stores. And unfortunately, they're also struggling during these times. They tend to have more expensive products. Their costs of operation are way more expensive because of the way that they collect jars, and they charge $2 for a jar or $1. It's just way more work, and that wasn't working either very well. And now we reassessed and we came with the conclusion that maybe we should implement a model like Lufa Farms, so sell your weekly basket. And that's what you can see in the website, like baskets of salads. And we have so far like 2 clients who really like the salads and want to order weekly. And we're trying different models based on that. I guess the difficulty is, again, the zero waste approach.
Yeah. So actually right now, we sell to restaurants, we sell to an online zero waste grocery, and we have our own website where we're trying to sell directly to clients. So we're kind of doing all 3 just because we've tried all 3. But I think the best model, and where a lot of new local producers are going, is directly to their clients. So they don't have to pay a commission to a food distributor or a grocery store, or pay like bulk or sell at bulk prices to restaurants.
Right. Because at this scale of the business is so small that it's hard to make a profit. So it is great if we can cut that 30% that middle people take from us. So that is the idea. But again, the challenging part is, first of all, when you're a small business, you have to do everything yourself, from the marketing to the accounting to the production, and find a way that this can become a zero waste business. That's by far, we've tried like many types of labels. Today we came up with a new idea to reduce the waste of paper on labels. It's not really aesthetic, but it saves a little bit more of time, which means that saves like labor cost, and increases the zero waste approach. But that, to answer more specifically to your question, we're reassessing every time the kind of market that we want. And I think that the idea would be to sell directly to the consumer to make sure that we have financial sustainability, and to offer the consumer a better price. Our greens are fresher than what you can get at IGA, and is the same price for the same amount, and is 100% local.
Yeah, I mean, some things are more expensive, but there's also a lot of varieties. Like, we're hoping to grow a lot of different varieties that you can't find anywhere else, that are interesting and tasty and cool.
Exactly. That would be the added value, the variety. Like, you cannot find those salad mixes with flowers for $6 at AGA. You find like your baby spinach salad. So we're trying to add value through that variety. And Gabe wanted to talk. Sorry.
Yeah, Gabe had his hand raised. Go ahead.
I was going to say that one challenge that we have been discussing, the 3 of us, that has come up, and that is like a continuing conversation, is who we're selling to, and who we have to sell to make the business work, in a sense. Like, I think that the 3 of us would love to be able to just like grow like amazingly good quality and like fun food, and like have it be enjoyed by people who like don't normally get to eat like organic, local, super fresh, nutritious food. But the reality of it is that like the market that we see potential in is not that one. It's like it's rich people. There's nothing wrong with rich people, but
There's more money to take. So.
But like, wouldn't it be cool if we had if wouldn't it be cool if it was like financially viable for a business like this and at this scale to be able to um, provide this kind of food to people who like don't normally have access to it? And I don't know exactly what it is. Like, our price is not like exorbitant. It is probably still like maybe slightly more than like most like lower income people would pay for the same thing, and it's also not the kind of products that like lower income people would maybe buy. So that's one thing. But a connected challenge, which like makes us into a really real challenge, is like you take a company like Loofah, for example, which like makes a lot of which grows a lot of the stuff that we grow, and like a pretty good quality, decent quality, I think, and like a pretty good price. And them too, I think like the majority of their clientele is more like a kind of bougie, like Plateau, Rosemont kind of clientele. And and allegedly, I don't know if this is hearsay, but Zach maybe can speak to this. Their workers have really bad conditions and like super low pay. Zach, fact check.
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but I've heard like anecdotally from several people that it's $13 an hour, and you gotta run through and harvest a bunch of peppers, and then they'll time you and say like, okay, that was okay. Now do it faster next time. And like the greenhouse is like 28 degrees Celsius and humid, and like they they also they're basically a food distributor at this point. They'll buy a bunch of food from local farmers from more rural regions, um, and they really pay them as little as they can, and then turn around and sell it at premium prices. I mean, that's how they're able to have opened 4 massive greenhouses, and they're really scaling up their business and producing a lot of local food. So there is some good in them ripping everyone else off, but that's kind of how they run their business. It's like a very corporate, cutting every corner where they can.
So I guess like we don't have like the raw facts on like what working conditions are there and like how much they're undercutting their suppliers and stuff. But like if that's the case, and also we don't know if that's like the only way to make this kind of business work. Like that's their business model, but I mean surely there's other ways. But like if it's the case that they have all these like negative externalities and effects of their business, and like it's not like, I don't know, elevating like the community like socioeconomically, even though it's like um it's elevating our perspective on food in terms of like greenhouses on roofs and like local food production, which is amazing. But like if they're only selling to the rich and like paying their workers really bad, then that's like the worst of both worlds.
Yeah. So there's a number of points you guys hit on that I wanted to ask about as well. And I think, yeah, I don't know where to start, but Gabe, how you just had mentioned, right, this idea that obviously the affordable, like the product is not affordable in the sense that like, yeah, you're selling to, like you said, Plateau, Rosemont, whatever rich people that can afford it. But I think that's what's so interesting about just food systems in general too, is this kind of inequality within them, right? Like this idea of, especially in cities, there's this concept of like a food desert. Like the poorer neighborhoods generally have harder access to food, or they have access to overall less healthy food, or not as many choices. So I guess, yeah, you touched on that, but like how you're kind of caught between wanting to have a good impact in terms of being able to provide to anyone good food, but at the same time you're working within this constriction that like that's just not viable as like you know a for-profit kind of company at your scale. um I don't know if I really had a question there, but I think it's one of the big challenges, and thinking about sustainability in kind of a bigger sense of how it's really linked with all these inequality and access and affordability and all these things. I don't know if anyone wanted to say anything on that, but Thomas had his hand raised, so we'll let him say something.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I don't know, something that came to mind when Gabe was talking about, or maybe somebody else was also talking about, like doing this type of urban agriculture, and then also, having a more social mandate and like catering to people who actually could do with enjoying this kind of type of food. I mean, obviously, it's not the best example, but just because it's it's a community organization like the Centre Paul Roulant. Do you guys? Yeah, I'm sure you've like looked into how they work with the food producers. Like, it is still quite expensive actually, but I know there's like also, I think there's like food delivery to like less fortunate people. I think at like reduced prices, but I'm not entirely sure. So that sounds like a model that could be interesting, and I'm curious to know if you guys have like what you guys know about their model.
So I've spoken to the people at Centre Paul and volunteered like once. Um, it's from what I understand, it's government supported community organization, and they do really nice work. Exactly what you're saying. They deliver food to elderly people, like vulnerable elderly people, like little meal kits. And often we actually have a lot of extra microgreens and greens left over, and I brought some to them to add to their meals, and they said, "Oh, we don't use microgreens in our meals anymore." I think there's like a slight risk um, of food poisoning or something, because microgreens are very humid. Like they're similar to sprouts, so maybe for elderly people, they just don't want to include that in their meals. But yeah, I think definitely uh, there's there's a lot to look into in terms of government programs um, to support vulnerable populations, or just extra food that's left over that's maybe not marketable, that can be given to kitchens that can transform it into something that's nutritious for whoever needs it.
Gabe had a comment.
I don't know much about Centre Paul Roulant's model either, but I think that one of our objectives with Ave is that it be self-sufficient, and like, yeah, Centre Paul Roulant, I imagine, lives in a big way off of subsidy, which is chill. But I think that with food, there should be a way to have it be self-sufficient financially. And I think that it's valuable for communities to figure out a way to be self-sufficient in like, especially with food, so that they don't have to rely on like government subsidy coming in one year and maybe not the next for their community garden and stuff. So I think that's another thing that interests me in this project is like, how can we like strike the balance between making enough money to like support, say, 3 salaries, but also make it like affordable in such a way that it can really contribute to the community.
I don't
Yeah.
know how to raise my hand. Can I just jump in for a second? Scott, Zach's dad.
Sure, go for it.
So what Gabe was talking about before about selling to rich people, but then really wanting to reach a much wider audience. I think when you have a startup in a business like this, often in a lot of successful other businesses, they've started by designing and catering their product to the rich people so they could build a business. And then once they get their business running, they find a way of getting economies of scale and stuff like that so they can then access the larger market. But you start with the rich people because that's where the money is.
Yeah, that's a
if at
good
some
point.
We can scale up. Oh, less than a minute. Well, at some point we can scale up and labor costs are reduced because we gain more efficiency. We can offer a product that would be more affordable for less rich people or people with less monetary means. And that is the long-term idea of having that eventually we can scale up to a bigger farm and offer, a greater variety of products to a larger public.
So is the video going to end? Is the call going to end in less than a minute?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to maybe in the next call we can talk about less about Ave and more about food security and food systems in general.
We can also just rejoin the call if people want to stay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what we're doing is this meeting will end, but just click the link again, and we'll all find ourselves in here. So yeah, I guess I'll wrap it up because we're ending. So we'll go do a little intermission and just join back on the same call. All right. I think most of us are back here. But yeah, Zach, you kind of did part of my job for me, but I did want to not just focus on you guys as Ave, but really think about Ave in a broader scheme and kind of food and agriculture, urban agriculture is an important kind of link with our societies and being sustainable kind of going forward. We all need food to survive. So that's a very kind of important thing. So I think everyone's back in. Yeah, I guess you mentioned some other things earlier too that kind of touch on some of these issues that we see. So one of these is the fact that the true cost of what we buy as consumers in the capitalist system that we have is not really present in the products, right? So for an example, like your product is more expensive to a consumer, but it's actually makes sense because it's taking into account you're being zero waste, that's added value. You're local, that's another added kind of value. Whereas these large farms or large food suppliers and stuff, they're actually, the cost of their product is not actually represented in the cost to the consumer. So if you think about just factory farming in general or large scale, there's a lot of external, pollutants and not to mention a big thing, which is I think the transportation is probably what makes non-local food very, very unsustainable. So yeah, I don't know if anyone had any ideas on that aspect of how we can think about, taking into account the costs, the true cost of what these things are, like whether that is, the government's role or whether that's we should be supporting businesses like Ave and just taking the brunt of, okay, we got to pay more. And that's, but again, we come around to that idea of affordability. So I guess what are some of the challenges for taking, or what are some ways we can think about challenging the so-called food systems that exist for not really taking into account the proper cost of things?
Yeah, so I think you definitely touched on something super important there. not just in agriculture, but like in everything in our society in general, is like the concept of externalized costs, externalized environmental costs. So agriculture is the number one human activity that damages the environment, that contributes to climate change. I was reading some stats. I think it's let's see here. I think 40% of Earth's ice-free land surface is used as cropland and pasture, and 66% of all water withdrawals are from agriculture. So most of our resource use is used for agriculture, and that has a huge impact on biodiversity, greenhouse gas emissions, and chemical pollutants and everything else. And a lot of those costs are not represented in the food we eat. So, you know, we eat a piece of beef, classic example, and to grow that cow, you had to put 20 times the weight of the cow in grain as an input into the cow. And you had to grow that grain, you had to use a whole bunch of chemical fertilizer and pesticides, a lot of which is run off into local water bodies, the Gulf of Mexico, wherever, and has many impacts. You know, it's impossible to count it up, to do the carbon accounting of all those impacts. So what is the true value of the food? How much are we underpaying for our food? And what will be the impact on future generations or just on our environment? So I don't know if anyone has anything to say about that.
I was trying to raise my hand earlier, but my background's not really letting me. But
Okay, go ahead.
yeah, I'm not used to having to raise my hand. I just usually talk when I want to, but I'm gonna respect this forum. Have some decorum. Okay. Yeah, I think it's gonna transition. It's gonna take time, but I think what Zach's doing is like is a very, very good initiative, and to kind of be maybe one of the first kind of starters to realize that this is going to have to be more of a thing in the future. And yeah, I think any way we can to help them out would be like what we can do locally. So yeah, I think I didn't even realize you guys were doing this talk, to be honest. I wasn't really paying attention, but we spoke about it briefly last time we were together, and yeah, it's a tough thing to be in a pandemic starting a business. So I know personally I'm gonna subscribe to the food basket, get some microgreens. And yeah, I think branding is really important. I work with a small business. I worked for a moving company last year, and they're doing quite well. They do have the benefit of being kind of recession proof in that even in this pandemic, they have some business because people are still moving, I guess. And they're still considered essential. But their branding is a lot of what gets them clients and their reputation. So as long as you kind of stick with the foundation, the mentality you have, and you're just, you know, you're confident in it, and because you know you're doing a good thing. So it's just a matter of time, in my opinion, until you get to kind of that critical mass. And yeah, like your father mentioned, you know, if you can focus on marketing to the sector of the consumer sector that will be most likely to buy it, like, you know, rich people in Westmount, or, you know, hipsters in Plateau, like that's what you need to, that's your market, right? So the more you can, like, I don't know if you're at the point where you even need to like pay for ads or whatever, but it should be something in the back of your mind to get that visibility, because it's silly the amount of like stuff on the internet is just like people paying for ads and like likes or whatever. It's kind of it's all kind of backwards. Nothing is based on quality anymore. It's all based on like hype and who's willing to like hustle the most, and that's kind of business. Um, and you know what they say, like power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So like along the path, you're gonna just have to kind of try and stay true to your fundamentals and your beliefs, and not get like too greedy. But you know, I mean, yeah, do what you can. Like I've always wanted to start this type of business. Back in university, I did like a business proposal on this and stuff, and I'm really happy that you guys are taking the initiative to do this, and gonna try and support in what way I can. If you can get like volunteers in some way, like have it linked with education, like you know university students, to help like if they're getting some sort of educational experience, then you can have them as volunteers, right? And then um, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of ways. There's angel investors. There's people who see what's happening and want to be investing in the future, and will appreciate someone who can speak passionately about setting things up for the future in a way that makes sense. So there's that as well. Um, but yeah, it's inspirational. It's good.
Gabe, did
Sorry,
you
sorry
have
for
a?
taking so long.
That's okay.
Thanks, Liam.
I think we had some other comments too from people. Gabe, did you have something to say?
Yeah, Zach was talking about the environmental impacts. I was just learning recently on the radio about soil and how important and underestimated soil is in terms of carbon capture and climate change generally. And not just like soil. The idea is healthy soil that has nutrients in it and like a mix of minerals and has like lots of life forms in it. Apparently is like hugely underestimated and way like could be way more impactful than planting trees. Like planting an acre of trees would be less impact than like improving the quality of an acre's worth of soil.
Yeah, I just want to say quick, like for sure, a healthy soil has a lot of organic matter, which is carbon, and a lot of kind of organic and regenerative agricultural methods that are becoming more popular now focus on building a healthy soil. So just building up the organic matter in your soil, which is essentially capturing carbon from the atmosphere.
And James, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna what Zach mentioned before about the externalized costs. I mean, literally everything we buy is you're not actually paying the real price because of everything almost in our society has externalized costs. So if people were to actually pay the real price, you would probably see consumerism drop down substantially. But yeah, with the whole soil thing, because of our agricultural, like how it's so intensive these days, there just has to be more pesticides, more phosphates, more everything used to try and keep up the same amount of crops every year after year. And like the soil doesn't regenerate naturally. And then that's why, like in my class today, conservation system design, it's literally like there's nowhere on earth that hasn't been touched by human kind of like, well, humanity, I guess you can say, like even like polar bears, far reaches in the Arctic, let's say, like they have pesticides inside them. And just like two, when you're talking about food systems, it's kind of like you have to look at, I guess, the middlemen, like grocery stores and all that. Like, why are people going to pay now? They say maybe an average family will pay another $650 for food these days. And it's like, oh, well, Loblaws decides they're going to start charging like, 6 cents more for their shelf space per product or whatever it is. Then all of a sudden these middle, smaller suppliers, farmers, they have to raise their prices because they can't deal with that. And then it's just, and why is Loblaws doing that? Because they want to inflate their share price. They have to, they're beholden to shareholders, and then everybody has to, small farmers, they get hit. They eventually run out of money. They have to sell to the big conglomerates, and then rinse, repeat. And just like, what's that big Brazilian one, JBE or whatever it's called? Anyway, it's just crazy. So there's a lot of problems. And it's kind of tough too, because in that class today with conservation systems, there's like the people-centered approach, and there's like biology science approach. And those that are most reliant on the land, so generally the poorer people, they support human-centered. So how can we get the most of the land? So you get into that, people in Africa, South America, if they rely on the land, how do you kind of go about supporting these people while supporting the planet? It's tricky, and you get into this leads into other discussions, but anyway.
For sure. And just to add to that, I think one thing that I think needs to change in the way the global food system works is it needs to become more local in general. The fact that we get a lot of food from South America, and it's kind of like there's a global market for food and shipping is not an issue. Toby touched on the kind of emissions of transport of food, and actually compared to the rest of agriculture, it's not such a big slice, though we saw a lot of issues with COVID this year, like supply chains were being cut around the world, and like it was hard to get food to supermarkets and to the consumers. But in general, like you mentioned, James, the people-centered approach, like how do you decide how to use a piece of land for the best interests of the people who live there? I think the answer is local agriculture, instead of kind of like this international market oriented agriculture where basically us as Canadian consumers become the owners and deciders of a plot of land in Guatemala or anywhere else. Like we decide what they grow essentially based on our demands at the grocery store, which doesn't really make sense. It shouldn't be like that. And I think that kind of is one place where indoor agriculture fits in to kind of extend our growing season in Canada all year round. So we don't have to rely as much on imports.
Yeah, Thomas, you had a comment?
Yeah, I like the attention that's being paid to, somebody said earlier, phrased it as like the real value or the real cost of these of the products that come from like larger agriculture, and whether they're shipped internationally and whatnot. And the way that was phrased kind of made me think how it would be interesting to have, and I don't know, I mean, maybe I'm not making this up, maybe like I heard it somewhere and I'm just claiming it as mine, but like if there was some sort of like imposition of a tax based on environmental footprint, and I mean, like this would be perhaps a utopian situation, but like where the increase of that tax based on your environmental footprint would then like create an imbalance in the profitability or like market attractiveness of like more local like agriculture, or more like regenerative agriculture even at that. So I mean, it doesn't hurt to dream. And then I was also curious for like Ave, like about like the heaviness of your infrastructure. Like, how complex is it to make those like vertical gardens? Like you said you had a whole phase of like making it yourself or something, or like actually building it, and I was wondering if that was, you know, how intensive that was, and if you see that as like a model that could be like easily replicatable across the city, or if it's more difficult. Um, and then yeah, and then somebody was also, and then yeah, Gabe was talking about the importance of soil, and then that had me thinking about how currently like models for cities are kind of just like resource sinks that absorb like resources externally and then kind of don't really produce anything back. And then that got me thinking about human compost and if that could be something that cities could give back. But then again, kind of a utopian, maybe, or not so much scenario.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff there. I guess just to start with the infrastructure. There's two main pieces of infrastructure that I'm using. One is like a microgreen system, and it's basically just some industrial racking, some drain beds, and some plant trays. Like it's a pretty simple thing, and like there's a lot of resources on YouTube about how to build similar systems.
You could do it in a basement.
You can do it in a basement. You can do it in your house. You can get like a wire rack and some of these trays and some soil and microgreen seeds, and that's pretty much all you need. So that's pretty simple. The salad greens and herb system is more complex. It uses what are called zip grow towers. It's a hydroponic grow tower that I bought used. And the company also sells the racks that you need to put the towers in to circulate the water and all this stuff.
The company sells the whole system.
Yeah.
The system for the lights, the racking, like everything. They can build you your farm. Basically, you can buy a farm from them. It's very expensive though.
Yeah, it's just very expensive. So we decided to build it ourselves. Just basically copied their design.
We bought the towers from them, but we built the infrastructure that holds the towers and the lights.
Yeah, and bought cheaper lights from China. That's where all the cheap stuff, cheap electronics comes from. It's kind of crazy building this farm, trying to get kind of raw materials and like metal and like just like pieces of infrastructure. You realize like everything comes from China. Like you want anything, like there's no producers here. Like there's like one or two, you know, plastic plants or metal plants. Like it's really crazy how China is the global. This is kind of a different topic, but yeah.
And the infrastructure is basically made of wood and cloth racking, industrial cloth racking.
Some metal pipes and
metal pipes and some curtains. What do you call this?
Oh, the hold lights. I mean, it's kind of, we should have some photos. I don't know if you can see.
But we had to be resourceful because the idea is to like make the cost as low as possible.
Yeah.
And there's 5 structures that hold in total 100 towers, and each cloth rack has 2 faces with 15 towers each. And then we haven't figured out like a system of rotation for the plants, but we spent like 2 months building that. And it's actually funny because this idea came after Zach bought a small system for our house. So we had like 5 towers in our house growing basil and kale for almost a year. And so this is definitely something that people can have in their houses.
Yeah.
Like you could buy 4 towers and you could never have to buy kale or herbs again. And you can just grow them in your house. And if you automatize it, like, well, like if you buy the automatic system, which is kind of what we had, you don't really need to take care of it besides just washing it once in a while and put the nutrients in.
Yeah.
So it's pretty, it doesn't require you to know much about how to take care of plants, basically.
Cool.
And what about the infrastructure again?
Do you have sensors?
Yes, so there's the idea to automatize most of the farm. There's humidity sensors, there's light sensors, temperature sensors. It's self-watering, so the pipe will turn on and fill the system. You know, I don't know how, maybe you can talk more about that.
And everything basically is on a Wi-Fi controlled switch, which is, you know, it's a piece of technology that's come out in the last few years that's really cheap to make and really convenient because I can control the whole farm from my phone, essentially. And yeah, it's just the technologies that have come out in the last few years in terms of LED lights and wireless sensors and stuff like that have really facilitated this kind of thing. You know, 10 years ago, this would have cost like thousands and thousands of dollars, and now it's like very inexpensive to set up little systems like this.
You can get it at Canadian Tire, and if you're a good programmer, you can probably buy the sensors from China and make them yourself. But for $25, $40 in Canadian Tire, it saves a great amount of time, and just basically you can survey the farm from your phone, and there's cameras so we can see the farm when something is not working. So it's really good because it is promising, because maybe one day when everything will be running, you don't have to put more than a certain amount of hours a week to take care of everything if all your systems work perfectly in coordination.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely different.
Yeah, when I did the business analysis of the thing, there's more startup costs, but then the maintenance costs aren't so high.
Yeah.
I think, Andreas, did you have your hand raised before? I think I jumped over you.
Yeah, but that was like a while ago.
Okay.
We're not on the subject.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of things touched on, and some things Thomas mentioned we'll bring up later too when we think about ideas. But yeah, what you were just saying, kind of the ability for, you know, anyone to conceivably build this in their basement or in their house like you had done, is that, if we think on like a wider scale, does that make sense for people? Or like, what is kind of the dream, you know, food system that, you know, gives everyone enough food in a city, and, you know, it also cuts down on, you know, emissions, and, you know, is accessible? And is that what the answer is? Or how do you see, you know, a sustainable food system in our society? Gabe had his hand raised, but
so who had their hand raised? Sorry.
Gabe.
I just had an idea. Okay, what if, I don't know if this is the ideal, but like, say I have an extra room in my apartment and I buy this like zip grow tower system that Zach has devised, or like Zach helps me set it up. And I live in a 12 unit apartment building. If I go to my neighbors and say, hey, like, would you buy $5 worth of greens from me every week? And they're like, yeah, sure. And I turn a room in my apartment into a farm, hyper local farm, like I'm selling it to my neighbors, and my rent gets subsidized this way.
Airbnb a farm for farms.
Farm B&B.
Farm B&B.
That's my great idea.
This is genius.
You're gonna need to sell a lot of those to subsidize your rent in 2021.
Yes, rent is expensive.
But Zach, you were gonna say something before?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, touching on what you were saying, yeah, YouTube and the small farms movement in general is a very inspiring thing that I've been following, watching a lot of YouTube videos of people with microgreens farms or outdoor small organic farms or similar systems to the one we have, sharing information and ideas and techniques. And it's just been really great as an educational tool for as a young person trying to get into agriculture. And I think that, you know, obviously the internet internet and all these resources are available to everyone, and that scales really well to anyone who's interested, and that's great. And then to your point or your question about like what would be the ideal food system, I don't know. I don't know, but I definitely feel like it would be what's the word? A combination, mosaic of different types of food production, field production, indoor greenhouse, different plants. Like our farm, essentially, it only really grows leafy greens well. Like it would be difficult for us to grow anything else but leafy greens. And where our farm could be helpful is like, let's say there's a field out there that's growing lettuce, like we can grow the lettuce indoors, more space efficiently, using much less water, no pesticides, and they can grow something else outdoors, like corn, in a sustainable regenerative way, because that land, that soil, that natural sunlight is more valuable for higher energy, higher intensity crops. So it has to be a combination of everything we can do in a sustainable way to again, coming back to that great challenge of the 21st century, feed, what's going to be 9-10 billion people, and we already have like crazy food insecurity and malnutrition around the world. So those are challenges that already exist that we still haven't addressed.
Yeah. Andres, did you have a point?
Yeah, I just wanted to like come back to what we were talking about in the beginning, like the whole food system, how it works and how it can become more local. And I think the fact that you can buy your own farm, do that, you can grow your greens in your house. The fact that there are more and more projects, and we're talking about this indoor farming, is making that eventually the competition, like in the markets, I'm not a specialist or anything, but like just the fact that there are more and more companies like Lufa, like Ave, that are making this, can actually make feasible that regular people and like we can get greens and local food affordable in markets and not just selling to rich people. Like the fact that we're talking more and more about this, and the fact that it's affordable in more and more, it's kind of interesting how it can right now it's feasible to become more local than before and not just rely on traditional agriculture.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we're heading into our last 7 minutes. I want to really build on like stuff Thomas, Gabe had said, even what Andres had just said, thinking about some real kind of concrete actions or dreaming about how we can create these local food systems or food systems that are really sustainable and healthy for people. So yeah, really feel free to throw something out there or think also really concretely if you have either, like I'd like to really wrap up with what can I do as a person, what can you do as a person, just really think along those lines of actions, but also dreaming too. So please, anyone can jump in now.
I would just say support Ave and tell your friends about it. Buy the baskets. That's what I think we can all do here on a local level. And yeah, that's it.
I know something that I've done, or that I did for the first time this summer, was get like a community basket. That was not Lufa. It was from another farm, which I'm forgetting the name right now. And so that was delivered or I had to go pick it up every 2 weeks. And that was something that like I hadn't done before, even though I knew it existed. and to like keep up that habit and to encourage others to just like get into this like local agriculture baskets every week, and then you get like chicory and you have to like learn how to cook that. So it's like fun, but also is supporting local agriculture.
Yeah, I like that. Anyone else? Thomas, I know you mentioned talking about the government's role, and maybe can we fit in with that?
I mean, unless anyone here is from the government, I don't in that respect, I'm not sure. Whoa, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, in that regard, not much we can do. Maybe like, I mean, sometimes like these ideas comes from citizens who like mobilize and think they're good ideas and then pool their resources and like knowledge. And, you know, if there are any like, you know, if like economics experts merge with like agriculture, like likely minded agricultures like yourself, and, you know, pitch some sort of plan or like try to mobilize to get the governments to act, that's always something that is worth trying, because they have a lot of power that we don't. And yeah, and like, I guess it's cliche, but like be the change like you want to see. So, you know, if you have an idea, like go for it, and it doesn't have to be like the investment of a lifetime, but like maybe you'll along the way get some people interested in, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, sorry for putting you on the spot, but
Okay.
Pat, you had something?
Yeah, I could speak a bit to the idea you had of building in a price, like a tax on carbon emissions. I mean, we already kind of have that in they call it the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. It's essentially like it's a carbon tax and a kind of cap and trade scheme. And I think we have it in Canada nationally since 2 years ago, and it's increasing every year. And it's basically like quite effective from what I understand. Obviously, you could kind of look at other ways to also do it, and it doesn't consider land use, but it does consider every time that you put gas in a vehicle or natural gas or that kind of thing, which is like a massive. It's the overwhelming majority of what goes into our carbon emissions. So I mean, I'm not sure if it'll feel like disappointing because we can't do more because we're already doing it, or if it's kind of cool because we are doing it, but it's somewhere on that spectrum, I guess.
It's cool. It's cool.
Gabe had something?
I don't know if we have this in Canada. I kind of assume we do, but I know that in the US, there's massive subsidies to factory farms, the factory farming industry. So like, fuck, man, let's end the shit out of those subsidies. Because that, like, the thing is that like free market people would be down for that too, right? Like, it's not like we're putting a tax on meat. Oh man, a tax on meat. It's like, no, it's just like the government shouldn't be subsidizing fucking factory farms. Seems like a win-win for everyone, except the factory farms.
And all the people who like hamburgers in the States, which is a lot of people.
They'll just have to make thinner patties.
Is anyone?
Well, it's also like the price control too, but like we waste more food controlling the price just because it's easier to just plow it back into the ground than it is to get it to market. It costs too much. So anyway, that's a bigger conversation.
Yeah. Any final dreams or action things we can do?
That we all stay engaged as we are here today all together. It's very inspiring to see so many people interested in our food systems and agriculture and what we're doing with Ave, and yeah.
Yeah, Gabe.
I feel like we can look into our local
food security initiatives, because like pretty much every neighborhood in Montreal has one. I live in Centre Sud, and we have like this amazing like coalition of community organizations that like hosts a whole slew of projects, including like really wild like vegetable growing projects like in the street and stuff. And every neighborhood has this stuff, so I think we should get informed about that kind of thing.